I never considered myself a troublemaker, but HOA Karen seemed determined to turn me into one. She was the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, a woman whose clipboard and smug attitude made her the bane of every homeowner's existence. It started with little things: fines for leaving my garbage bins out 5 minutes past collection time, passive-aggressive emails about the color of my mailbox, and absurd warnings about the length of my grass. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened last Tuesday. I walked outside, coffee in hand, only to find that my driveway was gone. Not damaged, not blocked, gone. In its place was a brand new strip of perfectly manicured lawn, complete with garden gnomes, a sprinkler system, and a decorative sign that read, "Community Park brought to you by the HOA." I nearly choked on my coffee. My driveway, the one I'd used for 5 years, had been paved over and turned into some kind of HOA-sanctioned mini park. There was even a bench. A bench. I stormed into my house, grabbed my phone, and dialed the HOA office. It went straight to voicemail. Fuming, I marched to Karen's house. She answered the door with that infuriating smirk. "Oh, it's you," she said, clipboard in hand. "What can I do for you?" "You stole my driveway, Karen." She rolled her eyes. "It wasn't stolen. The HOA decided to repurpose underutilized space for the good of the community." "My driveway was not underutilized," I snapped. "I park my car there every day." She sighed dramatically. "Well, not anymore. It's an HOA-approved green space now. And if you try to remove it, you'll be fined for unauthorized construction." I was too angry to speak. "Anyway," she continued, "I suggest you start parking on the street like everyone else." "The street that you just banned overnight parking on?" She beamed. "Exactly. Have a great day." Then she shut the door in my face. I stood there, fuming, my fist clenched. This woman had turned my property into a public space without permission, and she expected me to just accept it? No. Absolutely not. If Karen wanted a battle, she was going to get one. And that was when I had the idea. I turned on my heel, marched back to my house, and grabbed my laptop. If Karen thought she could play dirty, she had no idea who she was messing with. Because I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to make sure she regretted ever setting foot on my property. And it all started with a moat. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that simply confronting Karen wouldn't be enough. Oh, I could fight her in the courts, or I could just call her out at the next HOA meeting. But there was something far more satisfying I had in mind. I wasn't just going to reclaim my driveway. I was going to outdo her in every possible way. I needed to build something so ridiculous, so over the top, that it would force her to back down. As the saying goes, if you can't beat them, drown them in absurdity. I'd seen it done before, mostly in cartoons or those extravagant medieval movies, but a moat, it was perfect. I started making plans. It wasn't enough to build a simple trench around my house. I needed something grand. A water-filled moat, with all the trimmings, drawbridges, bridges with hidden traps, and, of course, a few decorative alligators. Okay, maybe not actual alligators, but the idea was solid. The first step was to call a contractor. After all, I had no idea how to dig a moat on my own without making the entire block flood. I scrolled through reviews for a few companies, and then I found the one that stood out. Duncan's Dream Landscapes. "We build anything, even moats." Perfect. I immediately called them. "Duncan's Dream Landscapes," a cheerful voice said. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm looking to build a moat around my house." There was a brief silence on the other end, followed by a nervous laugh. "A moat? Like? With water?" "Exactly. Full-on medieval-style moat. Water, drawbridge, the works." The laughter turned into a chuckle, then a long pause. "Well, that's a first. But I'm game. Let's talk about what you want." We discussed the details. The moat would run the entire perimeter of my property. I wanted it deep enough to prevent anyone from simply strolling through, with a two-tiered drawbridge system that would lower only when I wanted it to. Duncan assured me that the moat would be eco-friendly, and I made sure to request some landscaping elements: pond lilies, decorative rocks, and a few weeping willows. It had to look natural. The contractor quoted me a fair price, and we set a start date. But Karen wasn't going to sit idly by while I turned my house into a medieval fortress. She was relentless. As soon as the construction began, she was on the warpath. She called me every morning, asking if I had permits for the moat. I told her I didn't need a permit for something as harmless as a water feature around my house. But Karen was persistent. She started emailing the HOA, raising concerns about the potential flooding. "What if the moat ruins the aesthetic of the neighborhood?" she complained. "What if it's a hazard for the children? What if the moat attracts wildlife?" Wildlife? I had no idea where she was going with this, but I wasn't concerned. The moat was happening, and nothing was going to stop it. I checked in on the project every day, marveling at the progress. By the end of the week, the moat was almost complete. The water was flowing, and the drawbridge was being installed. All that was left was a little finishing touch. I had a plan, a well-thought-out strategy. Karen would have no choice but to retreat, defeated and humiliated. Then, the inevitable happened. One day, as I inspected the moat, Karen appeared at my front door, clipboard in hand, her face flushed with indignation. "Enough is enough," she shouted. "This isn't allowed. You're not going to get away with this." I smiled. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. "Oh, Karen," I said, stepping aside and gesturing to the moat. "I think you'll find it's already too late." She blinked, confused. "What? What is this?" "This," I said, "is a moat. And unless you're planning on swimming through it to get to my front door, I suggest you go back to your little clipboard and find a more reasonable issue to complain about." Karen's face went red. The HOA wasn't going to save her now. But then the twist: just as I was about to give my victory speech, I saw the real problem coming. I had been so focused on Karen that I had forgotten about the community. And Karen wasn't the only one who had a complaint about my little project. Had underestimated the power of a collective neighborhood. Sure, Karen was the most vocal, but the HOA was a multi-headed beast, one that fed off her complaints. What I hadn't counted on was the fact that the entire neighborhood had somehow united against my moat. The first sign of trouble came when I noticed several of my neighbors standing on the street, staring at my house. At first, I thought they were admiring my handiwork, but then I heard a few muttered comments. "I can't believe he built a moat around his house. Do you think he's trying to be a vampire? Is that legal? What if someone falls in?" My heart sank. I hadn't expected such a backlash. The whispers grew louder. By the next day, I received a visit from Chad and Tanya, a couple who lived a few houses down. Chad was a gym rat with a perpetually orange tan, and Tanya, well, she wasn't Karen, but she certainly had her own opinions. "Hey, buddy, can we talk about your moat?" Chad asked, eyeing the bridge like it might collapse at any second. "Sure," I said, bracing myself. Tanya crossed her arms. "Look, we don't have a problem with you being creative, but the moat?" She gestured to the water that was still a little too murky for my liking. "It's not exactly what we envisioned for this neighborhood. It's a safety hazard. What if kids come over to play and fall in?" I finished her sentence. "I've put up signs warning them not to, and besides, it's eco-friendly. It's a beautiful water feature." "We don't want a water feature," Chad snapped. "This is a residential area, not a water park." Tanya leaned in. "We're talking to the HOA about this, okay? If we all agree that it's an issue, they'll make you remove it." I knew then that I had lost the battle for now. The HOA's collective influence was strong. The moat wasn't just a quirky design, it was a symbol of rebellion in Karen's eyes, and now it had become a point of contention for everyone. I wasn't ready to give up just yet, though. I couldn't back down now. If I removed the moat, I'd lose all respect in the neighborhood. It was a standoff, and I wasn't about to let Karen win. As the days passed, more people stopped by to voice their displeasure, and I found myself defending my moat every time I stepped out of the house. It's just a design choice, I insisted. It's art. But Karen was relentless, too. Every time I turned around, there she was, clipboard in hand, taking notes, writing complaints. She even sent a petition around the neighborhood, gathering signatures in an attempt to have me fined for constructing something that wasn't in compliance with neighborhood aesthetics. My mood soured. I realized I had become a villain in my own home. The neighborhood had turned on me, and suddenly, I wasn't just fighting Karen, I was fighting for the very soul of the community. Things reached a boiling point when the HOA called an emergency meeting to discuss the moat. I had to attend. That evening, I walked into the HOA's community hall. The room was packed. Karen was already there, sitting at the front, looking smug as always. As I walked down the aisle, every eye turned to me. There were murmurs, and I could feel the tension in the air. "Mr. Karen said, raising her hand. "We've had several complaints about your moat. You've been warned multiple times about violating HOA rules, and now you're causing a disruption in the entire neighborhood. We are demanding that you remove it immediately." I stood at the front, meeting Karen's gaze. She looked confident, almost triumphant. The other residents seemed to be in agreement, nodding their heads and whispering among themselves. The tension was palpable. Everyone was waiting for me to back down. But I wasn't about to let them push me around. I took a deep breath and said, "I've got a better idea." The room fell silent. "Let's make this a competition," I suggested, my voice growing louder with conviction. "I'll keep the moat, but if you all can come up with something more creative, more engaging for this community, something that would add value to the neighborhood without all the complaints, I'll happily remove the moat and donate the land for whatever your heart's desire." The room erupted into chatter. Karen's face turned red with rage. "You can't just—" "Hold on, Karen," I said, cutting her off. "Let's make this fun. If you think you can come up with something better, I'm game. But I'm not removing the moat until we get a creative solution from the entire neighborhood." Karen's smile faltered. It was a gamble, but I was all in now. The next step was to see if the community could out-creatively me. And I was going to make sure they couldn't. Karen thought she had me backed into a corner, but now the game had changed. Instead of outright demanding I remove my moat, the HOA was forced into my competition. And let me tell you, they were not happy about it. The next morning, I found Karen and a handful of HOA loyalists pacing around my moat, whispering furiously. Some had notebooks, others had measuring tape, and at least one person had a clipboard bigger than Karen's. That's when I knew they were taking this seriously. By the afternoon, flyers appeared in everyone's mailbox. Community meeting, HOA funds available for new public project. Vote to replace the moat. They were rallying the neighborhood against me. It was war. The HOA's counterattack. Within days, the HOA's creative committee unveiled their alternative to my Moat A community garden. Karen stood at the front of the crowd at the next meeting, smug as ever, as she presented a slideshow. Bullet points, charts, even a 3D rendering of the garden. They were going all out. This beautiful, HOA-approved space will promote sustainability, community bonding, and fresh organic vegetables for all our residents, Karen droned on. It will add value to the neighborhood while removing the hideous and dangerous water hazard at. The crowd nodded in agreement. Karen was gaining ground. But I wasn't going down without a fight. My counterattack. I stood up, cleared my throat, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, while I appreciate the effort, I have one question. Everyone turned to me. I took a dramatic pause and then said, what if we put fish in the moat? Silence. Karen blinked. What? I nodded. A koi pond. A big, beautiful, serene, HOA-approved koi pond. Complete with little bridges, lanterns, and maybe even a tiny waterfall. That way, it's not just a moat, it's an elegant, peaceful neighborhood attraction. The crowd murmured. I could see some people actually considering it. Karen slammed her fist on the table. No, this isn't about making the moat fancier. It's about removing it. But Karen, I said, feigning innocence, you're always talking about improving the community. A koi pond is aesthetically pleasing. It's basically a water feature. You love water features, don't you? Some of the HOA members nodded. Karen turned red. She knew she was losing control of the narrative. Then, the unexpected happened. Just when I thought I had turned the tables, something I did not expect happened. A commotion erupted outside. People rushed to the door. I followed, my heart racing. And then I saw it. A giant moving truck was pulling into the neighborhood. A brand new family was moving in, directly next to me. The new neighbor? A lawyer. And not just any lawyer. An ex-HOA attorney. The moment he stepped out, Karen's face turned ghost white. And I knew this was about to get really interesting. Karen stood frozen as the new neighbor stepped out of his truck. Tall, confident, and carrying an air of legal destruction, he surveyed the neighborhood before locking eyes with me. Nice place, he said, extending a hand. I'm Daniel. Just moved in. I shook his hand, barely containing my grin. Welcome to the neighborhood. I'd say it's peaceful here, but I gestured toward the growing horde of HOA members whispering and pointing at us. Daniel smirked. I can see that. Then he glanced at my moat. Is that a drawbridge? Karen, clearly recovering from shock, stormed forward, her clipboard gripped tightly. Mr. Daniel, before you get too comfortable, I think it's important you're aware that we have rules in this community. And this man, she pointed at me like I had committed a war crime, has illegally constructed a giant, unsanctioned body of water around his house. Daniel raised an eyebrow. And Karen blinked. What do you mean? And it's a violation of neighborhood policy. He has to remove it. Daniel scratched his chin. Well, actually, I did a little research before moving in. I specialize in HOA law, and from what I can see, he gestured toward the moat. This technically counts as a decorative water feature. And if I recall, the HOA handbook says decorative water features are allowed. Karen's mouth dropped open. No, she stammered. That doesn't apply to this. This is different. This is a castle fortress abomination. Daniel pulled a thick legal binder from his truck. An HOA handbook. He flipped a few pages, then tapped one with his finger. It says here that as long as a water feature is within property lines, doesn't cause flooding, and is aesthetically maintained, it's perfectly legal. He looked up at me, smirking. You're keeping the moat, right? Oh, absolutely. Karen exploded. This isn't over, she shrieked, storming off. But it was. Karen tried everything to fight back. She attempted to file complaints, called emergency HOA meetings, and even tried to get city officials involved. But here's the thing, she had already broken her own rules. Remember when she stole my driveway to make her ridiculous HOA mini park? Yeah, turns out that was illegal. And Daniel, being the absolute legend he was, dug into HOA finances and found several violations in Karen's leadership. Long story short, Karen was fined thousands for misusing HOA funds. The mini park she built over my driveway? Torn up. My driveway? Restored. The HOA? Slapped with a lawsuit for violating my property rights. And the best part? Karen resigned in disgrace. Victory. A month later, my moat still stood. The drawbridge worked flawlessly. My new neighbor Daniel, he became my best friend. And as for the rest of the neighborhood, well, once the drama died down, people actually liked the moat. The HOA disbanded. And in its place, we turned my moat into a neighborhood koi pond, complete with little stepping stones and a footbridge. Because, in the end, if you're going to win against an HOA Karen, you don't fight them head on. You out crazy them. Like and subscribe for more video like this.